So we are not quite, but very close to really taking off on this series. We're doing this, as I've said, each week from now until Easter. We're just going to go all the way through the Gospel of Luke. And it's a real chance to get to know Jesus better and to walk together as a congregation in getting to know Jesus. And so you have in your bulletin a reading plan, which has also been in the bulletin before. So if that's a duplicate, if you wouldn't mind just dropping it off. If you've already got one, just drop the extra one off on the table instead of throwing it away, because we'll leave a few of those on the table for visitors and people who haven't been here in a few weeks or whatever like that. And so, as you can see, this is January 4th, and we just have this reading for this week, which we already did about the boy Jesus in the temple. And beginning next week is when these readings are going to take off. And the sermon, it's going to be two pieces. The sermon will touch on pieces of those readings, and then, of course, the Dig Deeper material will walk through all the readings from that week. And so by the time we get to Easter, you will have walked through and studied the entire Gospel of Luke at a reasonably in-depth level. So I think that's very exciting. And I'm very, very glad that we're doing this. And the adventure begins. The adventure begins today. We are going to walk with Jesus. And think about Jesus' life. It's quite a thing of ups and downs, Jesus' life is. There's healings, there's mountains, and there's valleys, and there's political intrigue, and there's miracles, and there's betrayal, and there's execution, and there's resurrection. Jesus' life is really this. We look at it and we see this very kind of adventure thing. And so we're going to walk with Jesus on this adventure. And we want to get ready. And when you get ready for an adventure, I have contemplated, and I'm still contemplating, hiking the Appalachian Trail. Because that just seems like something cool to do. And when you get ready for an adventure like that, you don't just one day say, I think next Thursday I will start hiking the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine. That's how far it goes. But there are people every year who hike the entire trail in one summer, and I think that would be fun. And you think I'm nuts. Or at least my wife thinks I'm nuts. And if you're getting ready for a big adventure, you want to prepare. You don't want to just go off on it. And so we're getting ready to go into Luke, and we want to get prepared to go on this adventure with Jesus. And to get prepared for an adventure, I can think of at least three things you want. You want to have the right equipment. If you go on a hike, you don't want to have like lousy shoes and be 30 miles into the wilderness, right? You got to have good equipment, good backpack. You got to have water. You got to have all the stuff you need to survive the adventure. You want to get good advice because other people have done that before, and you might as well make new creative mistakes instead of repeating other people's mistakes. And just in case you're interested, one of the biggest mistakes everybody makes in hiking the Appalachian Trail is they think the vast majority of people, the first chance they get to a post office where they can mail stuff home, they ship 30% of the stuff in their backpack home. They take laptops and solar chargers, and they have this vision of walking all day long and sitting peacefully under the trees, journaling and stuff. And evidently it doesn't actually turn out that way. You just walk all day, and then you throw a little food in your body and pass out. And then you get up the next morning and do the same thing. So good advice can help you avoid those kind of things. And we're going on an adventure, and so we want to get some good advice. And then you just want to get yourself ready, right? Get yourself into a bit of training. And so that's what we're going to do. We want to get the right equipment. We want to get the right stuff. We want to be ready for this adventure with Jesus. And the first thing we need, of course, is the Bible itself, because that's where we're going. That's our main tool for walking with Jesus through this adventure of his life. And we've read this a couple other times over the past few weeks, and I just want to read it one more time because I think it's a really important verse. Because Luke says, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile a narrative of things that have been accomplished among us. So a lot of people have written these things down, but, who knows? They're kind of different perspectives. He's writing down the things that have been accomplished, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses. There's another important thing here. We're talking about Luke, who made sure he went to talk to eyewitnesses and ministers of the word. That's people who are followers of Christ, have delivered them to us. So this is an account based on eyewitness testimony that Luke has put together. It seemed good to me also, having followed all things closely for some time, to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus. Why? So that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. And I'm so glad he wrote that, because Luke is writing just decades after Jesus, and already there's people saying, well, did this really happen? Did that really happen? How do we know? And Luke says, listen, it's important while the eyewitnesses are still alive. I interviewed people, and I wrote down what I learned from eyewitnesses, including, I might suggest to you, Mary, because Luke has a much more detailed account of the birth than the other Gospels do. And so there's a reasonable probability that one of the people that Luke went to interview was Mary. So that's very interesting. And that's our tool. That's going to be our main tool for walking along with Jesus, getting the right equipment. But there's other things. You can obviously use your own Bible. These are a couple of really good websites for Bible research. You don't have to go out and buy any Bible software. There's a lot of great stuff on the internet. BibleGateway.com and Biblia.com. Because that's the equipment you need, is the Bible in some way or another. The next thing you need is some good advice, some good counsel for the journey. And you can get that in a variety of places. One, of course, would be Reverend John C. Rollison. I hope to be able to provide you some good counsel and advice as we walk through together. Hopefully my 4 years of seminary wasn't completely wasted. Another thing you might consider is a study Bible. If you don't have one, study Bibles have a lot of notes on the bottom. So one of the things we're going to see, and I think this is going to happen as you read the Bible, we're going to become sharper at noticing what you don't understand. Your eyes are your eyes and your mind are going to develop a little bit of sensitivity to, wow, maybe I don't really understand that. And study Bibles typically have at least half the page is notes about what the Bible text says. So it kind of really starts to explain things. And for instance, this text we just read, the boy Jesus goes to the temple. This is kind of a crazy thing. I mean, at least to our modern eyes, right? How could the parents possibly, really? I mean, don't you think Joseph and Mary should go to jail? If they did that now, they would at least have a folder started on them in social services, right? They go to Jerusalem, so let's. This is a good chance to just kind of walk through the kind of things that you would see in a study Bible, and even more so in a Bible commentary. First of all, there were 3 festivals where Jewish men were required to go to Jerusalem. So they went 3 times a year. And Nazareth is pretty far away. It's kind of quite up at the top. It's about 75 miles. And that seems like a long time, a long ways, and indeed it is. But typically, one could average about 20 miles a day. So 20, 40, 60, they get there midday on the 4th day of walking. And that seems like a long time to you and me. But we don't walk everywhere. And people are used to walking everywhere. And so that's a walk they would take. And the pace of life is very different. We fill our time. There's always more to do. And it wasn't always that way. Back then, if you're farming or something, you just scatter, you plant your seed, and then you hope. I mean, that's really what you do, because there's no irrigation or anything. And so there's a time for planting, and then there's just sort of waiting and, home maintenance or whatever. And then there's harvesting and maybe planting the crop for the next season, and then you've got to wait for a while. And so the idea that people would take a 3.5-day walk, be in Jerusalem for a festival for 2 or 3 days, doing the sacrifices and stuff, and then walk 3.5 days back. Remember, Nazareth is kind of at the further end, top end of the whole land of Israel. So that's about the max. The idea that they would do that is not really out of order with their society, even though it seems completely, it's kind of like that doesn't seem reasonable to us in some ways if we just read it on face value. And then they go there and they do the sacrifices and stuff they had to do. And by the way, Jesus went with them when he was 12. That's when a Jewish boy becomes what's called a son of the law. And so he's starting to be a man. And also, from what we could tell, that's about the time when the boys were really expected to take some responsibility and learn the family trade. And so Jesus comes with them to Jerusalem, and he's 12. He's a son of the law. He's expected to start acting like a man and learning the family trade. And when people traveled, they traveled in big caravans. All the men from the village would go, and some of the women if they could, and whatever like that. And they would all travel together. And picture yourself in if you can, picture yourself in this sort of a village kind of community where every year, a bunch of people get together and they travel together to Jerusalem, and then they travel back. And now you can start to see how Jesus' parents could lose track of him because they're used to traveling all together. There's a good chance they wouldn't see Jesus all day long. And, as a matter of fact, many of you remember, at least when I was growing up and earlier, when parents would tell their kids to get out of the house. And I don't want to see you until the sun goes down. That's the alarm, right? When the streetlights go on, come home. Other than that, get out of here. It's a nice day. and that's in our society. Think how much more a 12-year-old boy who is expected to start acting like a man, the parents would not be kind of keeping an eye on him anymore. They've been traveling for years. They live in the same village with all these people. Obviously, someone's keeping an eye on him. And then they go to camp for the night, and they're like, hey, you haven't seen him? You haven't seen him? You haven't seen him? So they get worried. About the time you would really expect them to get worried, and they go back and they search for 3 days, which is a long time, and they finally find Jesus in the temple. And what's Jesus doing? What's his response? He had to be in his Father's house. A 12-year-old is expected to start to be about his Father's business. And so Jesus, being the Son of God, goes to be about his Father's business, which takes place in the temple. And that's why Jesus is kind of surprised. Didn't you know that I would have to be in my Father's house? And then, of course, they say, why have you treated us this way? And he goes home. And the last thing to not gloss over, because it's a big deal, he went down with them and went to Nazareth and was submissive to them. Jesus Christ, the one through whom the universe was created, was submissive to his parents. And sometimes we gloss over, we don't, those are little lines that we're just like, oh yeah, kids are submissive. But this is different. This is Jesus. Jesus listened to his parents. And if Jesus can listen to his parents, if Jesus can be submissive, then we can be submissive too. In fact, many people at different times wanted Jesus to do what I would call a gratuitous miracle. Show me, Herod, show me something. Come on, I've heard about you. Let me see something. And Jesus, he didn't do those things. He's like, no, I'm not doing that. That's not what I'm about. There's only one time Jesus did a gratuitous miracle, and it was his first miracle. It was a wedding in Cana, because they ran out of wine, and you would think that would not be the business of the king of the universe to make sure a party had enough wine after they had drunk all the good wine, and they drunk the pots dry, right? But Jesus makes more wine. Why? It's only because his mother said to. That is she went to Jesus and said, Jesus, they're out of wine. Now that tells you that she must have had some inkling. She must have known already that Jesus could do something about it, right? She said, Jesus, they're out of wine. And he's like, what are you talking about? That's not what I'm about. And just do whatever he tells you. And she just assumes his obedience. And then he does what? he obeys his mother and turns water into wine. Only gratuitous miracle he ever did. So there's a lot of things in here that don't make sense to our modern eyes without studying, without learning, without getting that good advice, that good counsel. So that's part of what we're going to do as we walk through Luke. We're going to explore together, and your eyes are going to, you're going to develop little bells that are going to go off saying, hey, I might not really understand that as well as I thought I did. And it's going to be an adventure. It's going to be things, you're going to be challenged. You're going to be lifted up. Sometimes it might smack us down. Sometimes it might challenge the very way we look at our life. It might challenge what we do with our resources. It might challenge the way we think about other people. And adventures do that, don't they? A lot of time, somebody famous somewhere, because I don't want to take credit for it, said, travel the world not to discover the world, but to discover yourself. And I think that's part of what we're going to find as we go on Jesus' adventure of life with him. We're going to learn things about ourselves. And that's the third thing you have to do from that list, is you have to get yourself ready. You have to get yourself ready for an adventure. And so today we're just I want to get us ready. I want us to understand that there's going to be times when you're going to read something and it's going to hit you and make you elated. And there are times when you're going to read something and it's going to smack you in the face, or it's going to push you down, and it's going to weigh you down, and you're not going to be able to get out of your head for days. Because that's what the Word of God does to us. That's what the Bible does to us. It gets to us. We're going on, we've been calling it an adventure. We're going on this adventure with Jesus. So I brought a video clip just to sort of cast this as an adventure and see how it looks. And I think this should be the video clip. Let's see. There it is. This is from the movie Son of God last year.
You need help. There's nothing to help with.
What are you doing?
Going fishing.
I tell you, there's no fish out there. How did this happen?
Come with me.
What are we going to do?
Change the world. Your sins are forgiven, my son.
I thought only God could do that.
Which is easier, to say his sins are forgiven, or say, get up and walk?
I've had reports the young prophet of Nazareth. It's rumored he works miracles. They all do.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
Pray to him, and he will listen.
5,000 came to see him. 5,000.
Your hunger for righteousness will be filled through me.
Who knows what Pilate will do if the crowds run out of control?
That man, Judas, he wants to help us and crush any rebellion.
Save us from the Romans, Lord.
There is something unusual about him.
We must arrest this false prophet.
But what if he is who they say he is?
Won't somebody tell me?
Peter, come.
Answer if you can.
One of you here will betray me to my enemies.
I want someone to tell me. What is the soul of a man?
Jesus of Nazareth.
You are charged with blasphemy.
He has employed demons to heal. He threatened to destroy the temple.
Tell us, are you the Son of God? I am. I am coming soon.
So that's Jesus as the adventurer. He's surrounded by background music. He looks like Brad Pitt. And he's saying things like, we're going to change the world. And a little later on, halfway through the movie, Jesus looks off in the distance and says, and so it begins. Any movie where Jesus says, "and so it begins," is not a great movie, I have to say. I mean, if you like it, it's okay. Just don't go to this movie for a history lesson. And the reason I showed you that is because I've been talking about walking with Jesus as an adventure. And indeed it is. But if it's just an adventure, we're missing the point of what we're really doing when we're reading the scriptures, when we're walking through the life of Jesus. Would you be able to turn I think that's humming from the computer.
Turn it mute.
Yeah, turn that back down. Is it up?
There we go.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks. Sorry. Maybe it didn't distract anyone else, but it should have distracted. Thank you. So, the goal of this, if we just read to get knowledge about Jesus, if we just read it as a story and say, what an adventurous story, we are missing what the Bible is really about, what the scriptures are written for. Because what the scriptures are really written for is for us to know God. Is for us to know God. And to know God better, the Bible tells us we need to get to know Jesus better. And so when we go through this, when we walk with Jesus through the gospel according to Luke, we certainly are witnessing an adventurous story, but what we're really doing is getting to know God better. A couple of verses that have been very much in the mix in the past few weeks. John 1 verse 14, the Word became flesh. That the Word is sort of the essence of who God is, became flesh and dwelt among us. And we've seen His glory. Glory as of the only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. So the thing, the logos, the Word, the essence of who God is put on flesh. And that person's name was Jesus of Nazareth. And so as we walk through this adventurous life, we're not just watching an amazing life, death, and resurrection. We are getting to know God. We are getting to know God. Paul writes to the Christians in Colossae, Colossians 1, verses 19 to 20. For in Him all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell, and through Him to reconcile to Himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of His cross. In Jesus, the fullness of the deity was pleased to dwell. And in fact, Hebrews says this with even more stark clarity. He is the radiance of the glory of God and the exact imprint of His nature. That's what we're watching. We're going to walk through Luke. And what we're going to do as we walk through Luke, we're going to watch an adventure, to be sure, but more than that, we're going to watch God walking through human situations. And we're going to see, because Jesus of Nazareth is the exact imprint of God, we're going to see what God looks like if God could insert Himself into different human situations of all different types. And that is an amazing, amazing, amazing thing. And so as we read through Luke, we're not just reading an adventurous story, adventurous though it is. What we're really doing is getting to know God better by getting to know Jesus better. And so here I would like to suggest a different metaphor for you. I think the adventure part is good, but it's such a small piece. Because that's just like watching something happen to someone else. And that is not the point of the Bible. The point of the Bible is to draw us to God, to show us God, to draw us closer to Him. And so instead of going into a 3-month adventure novel, going through Luke, here's what I'd like you to think about. Maybe a way to look at our walk through Luke together. I would like you to think about it more as learning to dance with Jesus. Because we have ideas about what we should do in certain situations. And Jesus has ideas about what we should do in certain situations. And sometimes they're close, and sometimes they're quite far apart. And when you learn, how many of you have ever learned to dance with somebody? Anybody here done ballroom dancing? That kind of thing? A few? Okay. Well, when you learn ballroom dancing, you're learning to work with somebody else. And you have to learn to work together. And a lot of times, toes get stepped on because one person moves one way and one person moves the other. And that's why I think learning to dance with Jesus is a good metaphor for walking through Luke together. Because what we want to do, we want to get to where when Jesus moves, we move. When Jesus moves, we move. When Jesus moves, we move. And we need the same thing to learn to dance as we do to have an adventure. We need to get the right equipment. We got the manual, which is Luke, which was what we're going through. We still need to get good advice. We need to have teachers and things. And we need to get ourselves ready. But when you get yourself ready to dance with Jesus, that's different than getting yourself ready to read through the adventure life of Jesus. When you get yourself ready to dance with Jesus, it's a hard thing. And so as we go through Luke and we want to get ready, what we really want to see is God incarnate walking through an earthly life. Learning, and we want to learn and condition ourselves to respond like Jesus responds. That's learning to dance with Jesus. Because he came to the earth to die on the cross for our sins and show us how to live in love. And so we're going to walk through that. That's really what we're going to do. We're going to, as we walk through here, we're going to learn to dance with Jesus. We're going to read and we're going to pray and we're going to ask Jesus to help us learn to dance his way. And that's the last part. We're not just learning to dance with Jesus. We're learning to let him lead. This is one of the hardest things for some people when they're learning to dance, because most grown-ups like to be in control. And if you have a couple dancing, you have to have a leader. Traditionally, of course, it's been the male, but either it doesn't matter. You could spin that tail either way. But with your dancing, if you're dancing as a couple, one person has to be leading. One person has to be deciding where to go, and the other person has to willingly follow. Not only willingly follow, but joyfully follow. There has to be this interplay of emotion and will that allows one person to decide where to go and the other person to joyfully say, yes, let's go there. And that's the dance with Jesus right there. That's what we're looking for in Luke, is a chance to spend some real time with Jesus. Real time in real human situations. And you're going to have a dialogue with Jesus, because some of the things he does, some of the things he tells us to do are going to be hard to swallow, and some of them are going to seem natural. And that's the dance. We're going to spend 3 or 4 months dancing with Jesus and learning to let Jesus lead. So I hope that you will embrace this time in Luke. I hope we can all embrace it together and prepare our hearts and minds to begin to be open to the leadership of Jesus as we dance through the lives that he has given us on this earth. And let's take a moment to pray about that as we begin the time together. Father, Jesus' life was indeed an adventure, to be sure. But you know, if we just watch Jesus on the sidelines and say, wow, what an adventurous life, we are missing the very point of the transformed life that Jesus came to bring into our lives. Father, Jesus said that we need to die to ourselves to live for him. That's like learning to let him lead in the dance. Condition our hearts and our spirits, Father. Open our eyes. Get us ready for some wonderful realizations. Get us ready for some painful realizations. Help us to read through Luke, wanting to learn how to let Jesus lead. And to read through Luke knowing that Jesus came full of grace and truth. So that when we do hit those painful realizations, we know that we have always and will always, because of Jesus, live under your grace. And that you look on us with loving eyes and desire the best for us. So, Father, bless our reading of Jesus' life with your Holy Spirit, so that it becomes not just an adventure novel, but a dance manual to let Jesus lead us through our lives. In His name we ask this.